In sleepy Pine Ridge Valley, where the mountain air carries whispers of small-town stories, a grocery store name tag reading Sarah tells a simple tale of everyday life. But today, that name tag belongs to someone whose brother haunts the nightmares of terrorist cells across 3 continents, and as the Crimson Riders MC rumbles past Miller's Market, their leader Drake, Butcher Holbrook, is about to learn why threatening this quiet clerk will become the biggest mistake of his criminal career. Before we dive deeper, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning mist still clung to the Appalachian foothills as Sarah, Miller unlocked the heavy glass doors of her family's grocery store. The familiar scent of fresh bread from the bakery section and newly delivered produce filled the air as she flicked on the fluorescent lights, illuminating aisles that had served the community for 3 generations. 3 shopping carts waited in the parking lot for retrieval, a small task that would normally take just minutes, but something in the air made her pause before stepping outside. Sarah's movements were efficient as she began her morning routine, each action carrying the precision of someone who'd spent years mastering the art of running a small-town grocery store. But beneath her calm exterior lay a sharp awareness that her brother James had instilled in her during his brief visits home between deployments. "Always trust your instincts, little sister," he'd say, those intense eyes carrying the weight of experiences he never discussed. "Morning, Sarah," called out Tommy Chen, pushing through the side entrance with a stack of fresh produce invoices. Her assistant manager had his grandfather's work ethic and his mother's gift for numbers. He'd graduated top of his class from the local community college, but chose to help run the family store instead of taking some corporate position in the city. "You're early," Sarah said, accepting the paperwork with a grateful smile. "Wanted to get the morning inventory done before the rush?" "Actually," Tommy paused, his expression turning serious. "Heard some things about that motorcycle gang that moved into the old Patterson warehouse. They've been making rounds to local businesses." Sarah nodded slowly. She'd heard the whispers too. The Crimson Riders MC had been systematically working their way through Pine Ridge Valley, offering protection to local businesses. Those who refused tended to experience unfortunate accidents. The rumble of motorcycles cut through their conversation. Through the store's wide front windows, they watched 3 bikes cruise past, moving slow enough to make their presence known. The riders wore black leather vests emblazoned with the Crimson Riders emblem, a blood-red skull wreathed in flames. "4th time this week," Tommy muttered, unconsciously moving closer to Sarah as they watched the bikers pass. "Just looking for now?" Sarah replied, though her eyes tracked every detail of the riders' movements. Old habits from countless conversations. With James refusing to die, the morning brought their first customer, Eleanor Nana Winters, beloved former kindergarten teacher and current town gossip. The old woman made her way through the sliding doors, her floral dress as bright as her smile. "Sarah, my dear," Nana called out, her cane tapping against the polished floor. "Tell me you've got those organic peaches I love in stock." "Just got them in this morning, Nana. Tommy's about to put them out." The rest of her sentence was drowned out by the return of the motorcycles, 5 of them this time, pulling into the parking lot in a practiced formation that made Sarah's skin crawl. She recognized the military precision in their movements, something she'd seen countless times watching James train with his team. Their leader, Drake Butcher Holbrook, killed his engine but left his helmet on as he dismounted. He moved with the confidence of someone used to being feared, each step calculated to intimidate. Sarah recognized Ice, Ravage, Spike, and Ghost from the intelligence she'd been quietly gathering, spreading out in a loose semicircle around the store's entrance. "Miller's Market," Butcher called out, removing his helmet to reveal a face marked by a long scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw. "Heard good things about your produce selection." "We're closed for inventory," Sarah replied evenly, moving to stand between the bikers and Nana. "Funny, sign says you're open." Butcher's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Besides, this isn't about groceries. more like community outreach. Pine Ridge Valley is changing, growing. Businesses need protection these days. Tommy stepped forward, but Sarah subtly motioned him back. We have insurance. Not the kind that matters. Butcher's gaze lingered on Sarah a moment too long, making her wish she'd accepted James's offer to install those security upgrades last time he visited. See, accidents happen. Produce spoils, windows break, customers find their cars damaged. Smart business owners understand the value of additional coverage. A new voice joined the conversation as Lisa Chen, Tommy's 14-year-old sister, rode up on her bicycle. The girl froze when she saw the bikers, her young face showing a mix of fear and defiance. Store's closed, Lisa, Sarah called out firmly. Come back later. Butcher's attention shifted to the girl. Bit young for a job interview, but good to invest in youth. Teach them how the world really works. The threat in his voice was subtle, but clear. Sarah stepped forward, her movement casual but placing herself precisely between Butcher and Lisa. When she spoke, her voice carried an edge that would have made James proud. We're not interested in your kind of protection. Pine Ridge Valley isn't your territory. Something in Sarah's tone made Butcher's eyes narrow. The biker leader studied her more carefully, perhaps sensing that this wasn't just another small town. Grocery Clerk. Everyone's interested once they understand the stakes, Butcher replied. We'll give you time to think it over, but remember, Pine Ridge Valley is changing. Only question is whether you change with it or get broken by it. The bikers mounted up with practiced coordination. As they roared away, Sarah watched their formation through eyes trained by years of listening to James's stories. These weren't ordinary thugs. Their movements spoke of professional training. Sarah, Tommy's voice carried concern. Get Lisa home, Sarah replied quietly. Then help me close up early. We need to prepare. As Tommy led a protesting Lisa away, Sarah pulled out her phone and drafted a simple text message to a number she hadn't used in months. Time to come home, big brother, and the response came almost immediately. Team's ready. Just say when. Sarah looked around her family's store, built over 3 generations of honest work. She'd chosen this quiet life, this peaceful town, to stay close to her roots while James fought battles in distant lands. But as she began moving certain items to more strategic locations, her hands remembered other skills. Skills her brother had insisted on teaching her. Skills the Crimson Riders would soon discover they shouldn't have provoked. Dawn hadn't yet broken when Sarah began testing the new security cameras. To any passerby, they looked like ordinary surveillance equipment, but these had been shipped overnight from one of James's contacts. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency, remembering the endless drills her brother had put her through during his visits home. Those aren't standard cameras, are they? Tommy's voice startled her less than he probably hoped. She'd inherited their father's keen senses, but James had taught her how to sharpen them. Just some upgrades, she answered, connecting the final wire. The coffee Tommy brought smelled heavenly. Don't change the subject, Sarah, Tommy said firmly. First, the reinforced backdoor installation last night, now these cameras. What aren't you telling me? Sarah climbed down from the ladder, studying her friend's determined expression. He deserved the truth, or at least part of it. The Crimson Riders aren't just thugs on bikes, she explained, accepting the coffee. Their formation yesterday, their movements, they've had professional training. Military, probably special forces. How would you know that? Tommy's eyes narrowed. Sarah, what exactly does your brother do in the Navy? Before Sarah could answer, Lisa came rushing through the back door, out of breath and wide-eyed. Sarah! They're at Mr. Wong's restaurant. Sarah's muscles tensed. David Wong had been one of Pine Ridge Valley's first business owners to openly refuse the gang's protection racket. Stay here, she ordered, but Tommy was already grabbing his jacket. Mr. Wong is my uncle, he reminded her firmly. The walk to Golden Dragon restaurant took less than 2 minutes. Even from half a block away, they could hear Butcher's voice, calm but menacing. Kitchen fires can destroy everything in minutes, the biker leader was saying. Smart business owners understand the importance of proper protection. Sarah entered quietly through the back door, years of training with James taking over. She could hear Mr. Wong's defiant response. My family has run this restaurant for 30 years. We don't bow to threats. Times change, Ice growled, and Sarah heard the distinct sound of breaking plates. She moved silently through the kitchen, noting positions, angles, threats. 4 Crimson Riders inside. Butcher and Ice in the dining room, Ravage and Spike watching the front. Professional. Set up, but they'd left the back exposed. Amateur mistake. Consider this a warning, Butcher continued. Next time what? Sarah's voice cut through the tension as she emerged from the kitchen. Tommy positioned himself near his uncle while Lisa, who'd followed despite orders, stayed by the back door. Butcher turned slowly, unsurprised. This is a private business discussion, Miller. Not in Pine Ridge Valley. Sarah's stance was relaxed but perfectly balanced, just as James had taught her. Not with family. Family? Spike sneered, moving to flank Sarah. The biker was big, well-trained, but Sarah spotted 3 tells in his movement that revealed military background. Dishonorable discharge, probably. Mr. Wong's restaurant feeds half the town's kids. For free when their families are struggling, Sarah said evenly. That makes him family, and family looks out for each other here. Sheriff Kate Rodriguez chose that moment to walk in, her timing suspiciously perfect. Everything all right here, David? Just leaving, Butcher answered smoothly. Having a friendly chat about business opportunities. Funny kind of business that needs 4 guys to make a pitch, Rodriguez observed, her hand casually resting near her holstered weapon. The Crimson Riders withdrew with practiced precision, but Sarah caught the look Butcher gave her. This wasn't over. After they left, Rodriguez turned to Sarah. You know they're going to escalate now. I'm counting on it, Sarah replied quietly. Back at the store, Tommy confronted her. Sarah, what's really going on? First the cameras, then how you moved in there. That wasn't just watching your brother train. Sarah checked her phone, reading. A message from James. Equipment's ready. Team can be there in 4 hours if needed. Tommy, she began. There's something you need to know about my brother's service, but first we need to… The sound of breaking glass interrupted her. Through the new cameras, they watched 2 Crimson Riders, Ghost and Ravage, methodically slashing customer tires in the parking lot. Call Rodriguez, Sarah ordered, moving toward the door. Already did, Tommy replied, reminding her again how reliable he was. But Sarah, be careful. They're trying to provoke you. I know, she smiled slightly. That's their second mistake. Outside, Ghost and Ravage continued their work with military precision. Sarah noted their positions, their sight lines, their practiced movements. Ex-special forces, like she'd suspected. Wouldn't do that if I were you, she called out, her voice carrying quiet authority. Ghost spun, combat knife ready. Yeah? What are you going to do about it, grocery girl? Sarah's response was pure motion. Before either biker could react, she'd closed the distance and disarmed Ghost with a technique James had drilled with her countless times. The knife clattered away as Sarah stepped back, resuming her relaxed stance. Like I said, she repeated, calmly. Wouldn't do that if I were you. Ravage moved to attack, but Ghost grabbed his arm. The lead biker had recognized the technique, and Sarah saw the realization in his eyes. They'd seriously underestimated who they were dealing with. Butcher's gonna want to hear about this, Ghost muttered as they retreated to their bikes. Tommy emerged from the store as police sirens approached. Sarah, what was that? That, Sarah sighed, was me showing too much. They'll be back, and not just for intimidation now. Good. Tommy's voice carried his father's steel. Maybe it's time? They learned why you don't threaten family in Pine Ridge Valley. Sarah watched the Crimson Riders ride away, already anticipating their next move. She'd spent years training with James for scenarios like this, and one thing was certain: the real war was just beginning. Night had fallen over Pine Ridge Valley when a lone motorcycle pulled into Miller's Market's loading bay. Unlike the Crimson Rider's aggressive machines, this bike purred quietly, its rider moving with the kind of stealth that came from years of covert operations. Sarah was waiting at the service entrance before her brother could knock. "You're early," Sarah said, embracing James Miller. Even in civilian clothes, her brother carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of someone who'd spent years in elite military operations. James removed his helmet, revealing features weathered by countless missions. "Ghost showed up at my teammate's place in Oak Ridge this morning, asking questions about you." Inside, Tommy was finishing the day's inventory when he looked up and froze. He recognized James from the single photograph in Sarah's office. 4 men in desert camo, their faces younger but carrying the same intensity he now saw. "Commander Miller," Tommy said, standing straighter unconsciously. He'd never met Sarah's brother, but something in James's bearing commanded respect. "Just James now," he smiled, though his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. "Sarah says you've been watching her back." "Part of it anyway," Tommy replied, studying both siblings, "though I'm starting to think there's more to the Miller family business than groceries." Before either could respond, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was Lisa's mother, panic clear in her voice. "Sarah, there were bikers outside the school. They didn't do anything, just watched." But their message was clear. "Stay at the hospital," Sarah ordered, knowing Mrs. Chen's nursing shift was starting. "I'm sending someone to watch over you both." James was already moving. "I'll handle it." "These guys are watching you too closely now," Tommy said after James left. "Sarah, I need to know the truth. What exactly did your brother do in the Navy?" Sarah checked the security feeds before answering. "He was part of SEAL Team 6, the kind of operations they don't talk about. They specialized in dismantling criminal organizations that had military training." "Like the Crimson Riders?" "Exactly. Like them." "Ghost and Butcher?" "Ex-military, too. Special forces, probably. Discharged for reasons they don't discuss." Tommy absorbed this. "Is that why they're really here? Because of him?" "No," Sarah shook her head. "They chose Pine Ridge Valley because it's perfect for their operation. Small town, strategic location, stretched law enforcement. They didn't know about James, but now..." Sheriff Rodriguez's arrival interrupted them. The sheriff looked troubled. "Got some intel you need to see." She spread photos across the counter. They showed Crimson Riders members meeting with men in expensive suits, exchanging packages, monitoring traffic patterns. "They're not just running protection rackets," Rodriguez explained. "Pine Ridge Valley is meant to be their distribution hub. They've got former military guys setting up supply lines using legitimate businesses as cover." "How many bikes did you count coming in today?" Sarah asked. "At least 20 new ones. They're calling in reinforcements from other chapters." Tommy studied the photos. "These suits, they're not bikers." "Private security," James's voice came through Sarah's phone on speaker. "I recognize the type. Expensive professionals. This goes higher than just the Crimson Riders." The store's security system pinged. Through the cameras, they watched 5 motorcycles approach, led by Butcher, but something was different about their formation. "Tommy, Sarah," James's voice carried command. "Back office, now." "James," Sarah started. "Now." She moved, but stayed where she could see. Butcher entered first, flanked by Ghost and Ice, their stance pure military, hands carefully positioned near concealed weapons. "Quite the security setup you've got here, Miller," Butcher observed. "Military. Grade. Almost like you were expecting trouble." "Just cautious," Sarah replied. "Bad neighborhood lately." "Funny thing." Butcher moved with calculated precision. "Made some calls about your family. Interesting service record your brother has. Parts of it officially don't exist." "That a crime?" "No, but interfering with legitimate business operations, That could get messy. Sarah's stance shifted subtly. Tommy recognized the move from earlier, but saw it clearly now. Perfect balance, ready for explosive action. Pine Ridge Valley isn't your supply line, Sarah stated flatly. Walk away while you can. Butcher laughed. Supply line? This isn't about drugs, little girl. That's just the surface. We're building something bigger, something that could benefit from someone with your brother's experience. Not interested. No? Butcher's smile turned cold. What about your friend's safety? His sister? Lots of accidents can happen in a small town. Sarah moved faster than Tommy thought possible. In one fluid motion, she disarmed Ice and had the larger man pinned against a shelf. That's your last warning. Sarah's voice was deadly quiet. Threaten my family again, and we're not having conversations anymore. Ravage and Spike moved to intervene, but Butcher held up his hand. He studied Sarah with new respect, and something else. Recognition. You're not the only one with old teammates, Butcher said quietly. Difference is, mine aren't bound by rules anymore. Think about that when you're cleaning up tonight's mess. They left with military precision, but Tommy saw Sarah's expression. What did he mean, tonight's mess? Sarah was already moving, checking defensive positions. They'll hit somewhere in town, somewhere personal. Her phone buzzed. James's text. Chens are safe. Got them to a secure location. Mike is inbound with equipment. Tommy. Sarah turned to her friend. There's a go bag in the office safe. Combination is my mother's birthday. If anything happens, I'm not leaving you. No, she agreed, pride mixing with concern. You're too much like your father for that. But you need to know what we're up against. Rodriguez's radio crackled. All units. Fire reported at Golden Dragon Restaurant. Multiple suspects fleeing scene. Tommy grabbed his keys, but Sarah stopped him. That's what they want. They're watching, waiting for us to split up. But Uncle David's family, Tommy argued. Yes, Sarah agreed, touching her phone. That's why. I had James put our people in place first. Mr. Wong's safe, but now we know their playbook. Through the cameras, they watched more motorcycles gathering at the edges of their view. The Crimson Riders weren't just sending a message anymore. They were preparing for war. What do we do? Tommy asked quietly. Sarah checked her phone again. Mike's 30 minutes out, full kit. We defend what's ours, she answered. And we show them why they should have picked another town. The sound of breaking glass shattered the night as the first wave of attacks began. The first brick sailed through Miller's Market's front window, triggering Sarah's reinforced security measures. As glass shattered, metal shutters slammed down, automatically, turning the grocery store into a fortress. Through the cameras, they counted 12 Crimson Riders members, moving with military precision. They're testing our defenses, Sarah observed, watching Ice and Ravage coordinate the attackers' movements. This isn't their real attack. Tommy had already moved to their defensive positions, checking the equipment James had installed earlier. Security feed shows more bikes gathering 2 blocks east. Looks like their main force. Good observation. Sarah smiled grimly. You've been paying attention. Learned from the best, he replied, then tensed as bullets pinged off the metal shutters. They're getting bolder. Sarah's phone lit up with a text from Mike. 5 minutes out. South entrance clear. They're not watching the loading bay, Sarah confirmed, studying the security feeds. Typical military blind spot. They expect attacks from the front. Sheriff Rodriguez's voice crackled through their radio. Sarah, got E. Reports of Crimson Riders hitting 3 other businesses. They're trying to split emergency response. No, Sarah corrected. They're creating cover for something bigger. Kate, check their clubhouse. Bet it's empty right now. A moment later, Rodriguez confirmed. Place is cleared out, but we found something. Shipping manifests, bank records. This goes way beyond protection rackets. They're moving military-grade weapons. Makes sense, Sarah muttered. Ex-special forces, military contacts, legitimate businesses as cover. They're not just criminals. They're contractors. The security system pinged as a large truck approached from the south. Mike Hayes hadn't lost his touch. The vehicle looked like any delivery truck, but Sarah recognized the subtle armor. Modifications. "Tommy, cover the east window," she ordered. "They'll push hard when they see the truck." Right on cue, the Crimson Riders launched a coordinated assault. Smoke grenades bounced off the shutters, creating cover for their advance. But Sarah had been ready for this. Remote-triggered sprinklers activated, clearing the smoke and revealing their positions. Mike's truck backed smoothly into the loading bay as Tommy provided cover. The big man emerged carrying equipment cases, his movements fluid despite the weight. "Just like Damascus," Mike grinned, clasping Sarah's hand. Though she'd never served, James had made sure his sister trained with his team. "Brought the toys. Non-lethal only?" Sarah asked, helping unload. "Everything you asked for. Though these guys aren't playing by the same rules." Through their cameras, they watched Butcher arrive with the main force, at least 30 bikes. The gang leader was suited up in tactical gear now, no longer pretending to be just another biker. "Sarah," Rodriguez's voice was urgent. "Got another problem. Mayor's ordering us to stand down, says it's a local business dispute we shouldn't interfere with." "They've got people inside the department," Mike confirmed, unpacking gear. "Same playbook they used in South America. Corrupt the authorities, control the response." A new voice cut through their radio. "James, Chens are secure, but you need to see what we found. These guys aren't just running guns. They're setting up a private military training facility outside town, using the drug routes to move equipment and personnel. Pine Ridge Valley is just the beginning." "Smart girl," Mike approved, handing Tommy tactical gear. "Control the town, control the supply lines." More bullets struck the building as the Crimson Riders began a systematic assault. Their movements showed clear military training, coordinated fire teams, professional tactics. "They're hurting us," Sarah noted, studying their patterns. "Trying to force us into predictable defensive positions." "Unless that's what we want them to think," Tommy suggested, indicating the building plans he'd pulled up. "The store has some features they don't know about." Sarah studied her friend with pride. He hadn't just been learning the business, he'd been studying everything. "Mike, those flashbangs ready?" "Full set, non-lethal riot gear too, just like the old days." Butcher's voice boomed through a megaphone. "Final chance, Miller." "Stand down, let us in, and maybe we discuss terms. Fight, and we burn everything you care about to the ground." Sarah keyed her radio. "James, you in position?" "Ready when you are, sis. Got eyes on their whole perimeter." "Kate, you got what you need?" Rodriguez's response was grim. "Enough evidence to bury them, but we'll need federal backup. Local force is compromised." "Good." Sarah turned to Tommy and Mike. "Because we're not trying to beat them. We're trying to expose them." Through their cameras, they watched the Crimson Riders prepare for their final push. Butcher had transformed their gang into a military unit, every member moving with professional precision. But they'd made one critical mistake. "They think they're fighting a defensive action," Sarah explained, checking her gear. "They don't realize we've been playing offense since they first rolled into town." Tommy checked his tactical vest, another skill he'd apparently learned while she wasn't watching. "All those cameras we installed around town this week aren't just cameras, are they?" Mike grinned. "Your brother had me wire the whole grid. Every business they threatened, every route they used. We've been gathering evidence while they thought they were gathering strength." The first explosions hit their outer defenses as the Crimson Riders began their assault, but Sarah was smiling. The same expression James got when he solved particularly challenging problems. "Ready to show them why you don't threaten family in Pine Ridge Valley?" she asked. Tommy chambered a non-lethal round. "Been ready since they first threatened Uncle David." "Mike, light them up." The night erupted in carefully orchestrated chaos as Sarah's team executed their real plan. The Crimson Riders thought they were attacking a fortified grocery store. Instead, they'd walked into a trap 3 weeks in the making, and in the command center that used to be their office, Sarah Miller was about to prove that she was her brother's sister in more ways than one. The first wave of Crimson Riders hit, Precisely where Sarah expected. Front and east side, standard military assault pattern. What they didn't expect was the network of defensive measures Tommy had helped design, turning their own training against them. West team pinned down, Tommy reported from the security station. James has them trapped between the loading dock and the produce section. Sarah watched her friend coordinate their defense with natural skill. All those years of him studying the store's operations hadn't just been about inventory management. He'd been learning strategy, planning, the art of controlling space. "They're pushing hard on the south entrance," Mike called out, manning his position. Professional breaching equipment, military grade. Through their cameras, they watched Butcher directing his forces with tactical precision. The gang leader had shed all pretense of being a simple biker. His movements, his commands, everything screamed Special Forces training. Ice and Ravage. Leading their breach team, Sarah noted. Ghost coordinating their flanks. They're not just trained, they're used to working together. "Sarah," Tommy's voice carried controlled tension. "Sheriff Rodriguez is reporting multiple vehicles approaching from the north, not motorcycles, black SUVs. The security feeds confirmed it. 3 armored vehicles moving with professional precision. These weren't bikers. Their movement pattern spoke of private military contractors. Just like Baghdad, Mike muttered. Local muscle for frontline work, professionals for backup. Sarah's radio crackled with James's urgent voice. "Found something in their abandoned clubhouse. These guys aren't just running a training facility. They're setting up a private military pipeline, using Pine Ridge Valley as a staging ground for international operations." "Makes sense," Sarah replied, watching Butcher coordinate with the new arrivals. Small town, strategic location, corrupt local officials. Perfect setup for moving personnel and equipment without scrutiny. The first breaching charge detonated against the reinforced door, but Sarah had anticipated this. The explosion triggered their countermeasures, filling the approach with riot gas. "East team falling back," Tommy reported with professional calm. "They're regrouping for a second push." "No," Sarah corrected, studying their movement. "They're adapting. Butcher recognizes our defensive pattern. Tommy, shift to contingency 3. Her friend was already moving, implementing the backup plan they'd prepared. The store's lighting shifted, emergency systems activated, and suddenly, the Crimson Riders' carefully planned assault turned into chaos. "Multiple targets retreating," Mike called out. "They're not used to this level of resistance." Through their feeds, they watched Butcher grab his radio, fury evident in his movements. The gang leader had expected an easy target. Instead, he'd found opponents who matched his training and exceeded his preparation. "Miller," Butcher's voice boomed through their speakers. "You're making a mistake. You don't understand what you're interfering with." "Oh, I understand," Sarah replied calmly. "Private military contractors using motorcycle gangs as cover, setting up training camps disguised as criminal operations, using small towns as staging grounds for bigger operations." The silence that followed was telling. Then Butcher's voice returned. "Different now. Who are you really, Miller? Which unit?" "The kind that specializes in shutting down operations exactly like yours." Another explosion rocked the building, but this one felt wrong. Sarah recognized the pattern. It wasn't meant to breach. It was meant to distract. "Tommy, check the thermal cameras." Her friend was already moving. "They're going under, using the storm drains." "Not the ones we found," Sarah smiled grimly. "The ones we let them find." Mike took up position as Sarah moved to intercept the underground. Team. They'd prepared for this, letting the Crimson Riders discover some of their defensive preparations while hiding others. "James, you're up," Sarah radioed. "Show them why we mapped those tunnels." The underground assault team never had a chance. As they emerged into what they thought was the store's vulnerable underbelly, they found themselves in a prepared kill zone. Non-lethal rounds and riot gas turned their careful planning into a scrambling retreat. 6 targets disabled, James reported with professional satisfaction. "Their backup team is pulling back." "Sarah!" Tommy's voice carried warning. "Those SUVs are moving. They're bringing in heavy equipment. The security feeds showed what he meant. The private military contractors were unloading serious breaching gear. This wasn't gang violence anymore. This was a professional military operation. They're escalating, Mike observed, checking his equipment. Going to full tactical assault. Good, Sarah replied, because now we have proof that this isn't just criminal activity. Kate, you getting all this? Rodriguez's response crackled through. Every second, FBI is already en route. But Sarah, they're not going to let themselves get exposed like this. They'll burn everything first. As if confirming her words, new explosions rocked the perimeter. But these weren't breaching charges. They were setting fires, creating a wall of flame around the store. They're not trying to get in anymore, Tommy realized. They're trying to trap us. Sarah watched Butcher directing the operation with cold efficiency. No, they're trying to force us to burn our evidence. Through the smoke and chaos, Sarah saw Butcher finally understand. The gang leader's expression shifted from confidence to dawning comprehension as he realized the truth. They hadn't been attacking a defensive position at all. They'd walked into a carefully prepared trap laid by people who'd spent years taking down operations exactly like theirs. All teams. Sarah commanded, "Execute Phase 2. Show them why you don't threaten family in Pine Ridge Valley." The night erupted in carefully orchestrated chaos as Sarah's real plan went into action. The Crimson Riders thought they were dealing with a stubborn store owner and her friends. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Phase 2 began not with an explosion or an attack, but with the quiet click of Tommy activating their town-wide surveillance network. Every camera they'd installed while delivering groceries over the past 3 weeks came online simultaneously, creating a complete picture of the Crimson Riders' operation. "All sectors active," Tommy reported, his fingers flying over the controls. Getting feeds from Golden Dragon, Winter's hardware store, the auto shop. Everywhere they threatened people. Sarah watched with pride as her friend coordinated their counterattack. On the main screen, dozens of video feeds showed Crimson Riders members across Pine Ridge Valley suddenly realizing they were exposed. "They're pulling back from their secondary positions," Mike observed, watching their tactical display. "Trying to consolidate their forces." Through their cameras, they spotted Butcher conferring urgently with the private military contractors. The gang leader's composed facade had cracked, showing the desperation beneath. "James, status on the evidence?" Sarah radioed. "Got it all, sis. Weapons manifests, training schedules, financial records. These guys weren't just setting up a criminal operation. They were building a private army using Pine Ridge Valley as their recruitment center and training ground." Sheriff Rodriguez's voice cut in. "Sarah, you need to see this. Found a list. In their records, names of cops on their payroll, goes all the way up to the deputy mayor." "Not anymore," Tommy replied grimly, sending data packets to Rodriguez's secure line. "Every bribe, every threat, every corrupt deal. We've got it all on camera now." Outside, the Crimson Riders attempted to maintain their perimeter, but their professional discipline was cracking. Through the smoke, they watched Ice and Ravage arguing with the private contractors. "They're splitting," Mike noted with satisfaction. "Professionals don't like exposed operations." Butcher's voice boomed through their speakers, trying to maintain control. "Miller, you think some videos will stop us? We own this town." "Check your phones," Sarah responded calmly. Across Pine Ridge Valley, every business owner who'd been threatened by the Crimson Riders received a simple text message. Now, David Wong was the first to act. Security shutters slammed down across Golden Dragon restaurant, trapping 2 Crimson Riders members inside. At Winter's hardware store, hidden sprinklers activated, driving away bikers trying to set fire to the building. Throughout town, citizens who'd been quietly preparing for this moment fought back with carefully planned precision. "Local resistance activating," Tommy reported, pride in his voice. "Just like we planned." "Impossible," they heard Butcher mutter. over their intercepted communications. The whole town was coordinating. Not the whole town, Sarah replied over their channel. Just family. And in Pine Ridge Valley, family looks after its own. The private military contractors were already withdrawing, their black SUVs peeling away from the chaos. They recognized a compromised operation when they saw one. "Sir," Ghost's voice crackled over the Crimson Rider's frequency. "Our backup's pulling out. We've got federal vehicles approaching from the highway." "Who are you people?" Butcher demanded, real fear creeping into his voice. Sarah watched through their cameras as the gang leader's carefully constructed operation fell apart. "Just a grocery. Clerk and family protecting their home." "Sarah," Tommy's voice carried warning, "they're moving something from their secondary location. Big trucks, heavy security." The thermal cameras showed what he meant. The Crimson Riders were frantically loading equipment into unmarked vehicles at their training facility outside town. "Not just equipment," James reported from his observation post. "They're destroying records, burning files, standard cleansing operation." "Too late for that," Mike grinned, patching into the federal tactical frequency. "FBI's got their own surveillance up now. Satellites tracking every vehicle leaving town." On their main screen, they watched Butcher realize the full scope of what they'd done. The gang leader had thought he was dealing with local resistance. Instead, he'd walked into a carefully orchestrated trap designed by people who'd spent careers taking down operations like his. "All that work," Butcher's voice carried bitter acknowledgement. 3 months setting up supply lines, recruiting personnel, establishing our cover. How long were you watching us?" "Since the first day you rolled into town," Sarah replied. "You threatened the wrong family." "Speaking of family," Tommy cut in sharply, "we've got movement at the hospital. Crimson Riders squad approaching Lisa's position." Sarah tensed, but James's calm voice responded, "Already handled that team. They just found out why you don't mess with people under our protection." Through their feeds, they watched the would-be attackers retreat, several limping. James had clearly enjoyed teaching them that lesson. "They're getting desperate," Mike warned. "Desperate men make stupid choices." As if proving his point, new explosions rocked the store. But these weren't breaching charges. They were using military-grade incendiary devices now. "They're going to burn everything," Rodriguez reported urgently, "including their own evidence." "Let them try," Tommy replied, activating their final countermeasures, "because they still don't understand what they're really fighting." Sarah watched, Butcher organizing his remaining forces for one last push. The gang leader had finally shed all pretense of being a simple criminal. His movements, his commands, everything screamed military precision born of desperate necessity. "All teams," Sarah commanded, "prepare for final phase. They want to see what we're really capable of? Let's show them." Through smoke and fire, Pine Ridge Valley was about to witness why you don't threaten a family that specializes in taking down criminal empires. The Crimson Riders thought they were fighting for survival. They were about to learn they'd already lost. Flames painted Pine Ridge Valley in shades of orange as the Crimson Riders launched their desperate assault. Butcher had abandoned all pretense of gang activity. His remaining forces moved with pure military precision, using combat tactics that confirmed Sarah's suspicions about their background. 3 teams, professional pincer movement, Mike reported from his position. "They're not trying to breach anymore. They're going for total destruction." Tommy's fingers flew across their command center's keyboards, coordinating their town-wide defense network. Golden Dragon's got 2 of their demolition teams boxed in. Mr. Winters reporting their backup squad is trapped in the hardware store. We've got them scattered. Through their feeds, they watched Butcher directing the assault. Personally now, the gang leader's movements spoke of elite military training. Sarah recognized the style. "Navy SEALs," she muttered, watching Butcher's hand signals. "He was one of ours." "Explains a lot," James's voice crackled through their radio. "Found his real file in their records. Benjamin Butcher Holbrook, former SEAL Team 3. Discharged after an operation in Southeast Asia went bad. Same operation you were investigating before. Before they shut our unit down, James finished. It wasn't just a coincidence he chose Pine Ridge Valley. Sarah, Tommy's voice carried warning. They're bringing in something big. Thermal cameras showing heavy vehicles approaching from their training facility. The screens confirmed her warning. 3 unmarked trucks carrying equipment that made Mike whistle low. Military-grade thermite charges. They're going to burn everything, including their own evidence. FBI is 10 minutes out. Sheriff Rodriguez's voice cut through their channel. But Sarah, they've got roadblocks set up. Professional barricades. Armed personnel. They're buying time. Time for what? Tommy demanded, then answered his own question as new data flowed across his screens. They're moving something from their main facility. Something big enough to need a helicopter. Sarah watched Butcher coordinating the operation with cold efficiency. Not moving. Extracting someone important enough to have a contingency plan. Through their cameras, they spotted Ice and Ghost leading the assault on their south wall. The bikers had shed their leather for tactical gear, showing their true nature as trained military operators. "Miller!" Butcher's voice boomed through their speakers. "Last chance. Stand down, or we burn every building in Pine Ridge Valley to the ground." "You still don't get it," Sarah replied calmly. "This isn't about buildings." As if on cue, David. Wong's voice came through their network. "South team trapped and disarmed. Those military boys didn't expect resistance from a restaurant owner." More reports flooded in. Throughout Pine Ridge Valley, citizens who'd spent weeks preparing under Sarah's guidance were fighting back. Not with violence, but with carefully planned coordination that turned the Crimson Riders' military tactics against them. "Impossible," they heard Butcher mutter over their intercepted comms. "The whole town's working together." "That's what happens," Sarah broadcast, "when you threaten a community that knows how to fight back." A massive explosion rocked their east. Wall. But Tommy was already responding. Fire suppression systems they'd installed activated automatically, turning the Crimson Riders' own incendiary attack into chaos. "Sarah," Tommy called out. "Got movement at their command center. Looks like—" "I see it." Sarah watched their thermal feeds showing a figure being escorted to the waiting helicopter. "James?" "Already on it, sis. Got clear photos. You're not going to believe who they're extracting." The images came through. A man in an expensive suit being rushed to safety. Sarah recognized him immediately from James's mission briefings. "Victor." "Crane," Mike growled. "Private military contractor, supposed to be in federal custody after that mess in Thailand." "Now we know who's really backing their operation," Sarah noted, "and why they chose Pine Ridge Valley. They're not just training soldiers. They're rebuilding their old network." Another explosion rocked the store, but this one felt different. "Professional military-grade breach on level 2, Tommy reported. "They're through the outer wall." Sarah was already moving. "Mike, contingency 4. Tommy, initiate protocol echo." "James, already in position," her brother replied. Just like Bangkok. Through their surveillance network, they watched Butcher personally leading a tactical team through the breach. The gang leader moved with the skill of someone who'd done this hundreds of times, but there was desperation in his movements now. "You know what this really is, Miller," Butcher called out. "You were there in Thailand. You saw what happened when they tried to shut us down." "I remember," Sarah replied, taking up her position. "That's why we're not trying to shut you down. We're exposing you. FBI just breached their roadblocks." Tommy's voice carried triumph. 3 minutes out. "And Sarah, they're bringing serious backup." "Federal tactical teams," Rodriguez confirmed. "Real ones, not contractors. Plus DEA and ATF. Someone made some calls." "Crane's not going to like that," Mike noted with satisfaction. "His whole operation's about to go public." Another explosion, bigger than the others, shook the entire block. But Sarah was smiling. "That's the training facility going up," she explained. "They're destroying evidence." "Too late," Tommy reported. "Everything's already uploaded. Satellite feeds, financial records, personnel files, all transmitted to federal servers. They can burn the buildings, but they can't burn the truth. Through their cameras, they watched Butcher realize the full implications. The gang leader's military discipline cracked, showing raw fury beneath. "You don't understand," Butcher screamed. "We were building something, a private army that could operate without government restrictions. Pine Ridge Valley was just the beginning." "No," Sarah replied quietly. "Pine Ridge Valley is where it ends." The night erupted in coordinated chaos as Sarah's team executed their final move. The Crimson Riders thought they were fighting to protect their operation. They were about to learn they'd already lost everything that mattered. Red and blue lights flooded Pine Ridge Valley as federal. Vehicles poured into town. The Crimson Riders' roadblocks meant to delay local police proved useless against the coordinated federal response. Through their cameras, Sarah watched Butcher's expression shift from fury to cold calculation. "They're splitting up," Tommy reported from their command center. "3 teams breaking off toward pre-planned escape routes." "Not escape," Sarah corrected, recognizing the pattern. "Distraction. Watch Butcher." Sure enough, the gang leader was using the chaos to move his core team into position. Military training showed in every movement. This wasn't a retreat. It was a tactical repositioning. "FBI securing the training facility," Rodriguez reported through their radio. "But Sarah, they found bodies. Looks like the Crimson Riders cleaned house before we got here." "Eliminating witnesses," Mike growled. "Standard procedure for Crane's operations." James's voice cut in urgently. "Speaking of Crane, his helicopter just changed course. They're not heading for the interstate anymore. They're coming back around." Tommy's hands flew across their displays, tracking multiple threats. Got Crimson Riders converging on 3 points: the store, their clubhouse, and Sarah. They're heading for the hospital. "Lisa and Mrs. Chen," Sarah realized. "They're going after our people." "Already handled," James replied calmly. "Remember, those maintenance workers at the hospital? All former special forces, the Chens are safer than we are." Through their surveillance network, they watched federal tactical teams methodically securing the town, but Butcher's core group, Ice, Ghost, Ravage, and Spike, moved with too much precision to be caught easily. "Miller," Butcher's voice carried over their comms. "You remember Thailand? Remember what happens when you corner trained operators?" "I remember," Sarah replied, checking her equipment. "That's why we're not trying to corner you. We're exposing you." "You expose us. You expose your brother," Butcher shot back. "Your family, his unit, everything we did down there. Some things need to be exposed," Tommy's voice carried warning. "Sarah, thermal cameras showing movement in the storm drains. They're using our own tunnel maps against us." "No," Sarah smiled slightly. "They're using the tunnel maps we let them find." "James, charges set?" "Just like we planned." The night erupted with controlled explosions as key sections of Pine Ridge Valley's storm drain system collapsed, blocking the Crimson Riders' escape routes. Sarah's team hadn't just been preparing the town above ground. "Crane's helicopter is holding position," Tommy reported. "They're waiting for something, or someone." Sarah watched Butcher's movements on their cameras. "They won't leave without their operation commander." Another explosion rocked the store, but this one was different. Targeted, precise. The kind of blast that spoke of SEAL training. "Breach in Sector 4, Mike called out. "They're through our inner defenses." "Good," Sarah replied calmly. "Let them come." Through their feeds, they watched Butcher lead his tactical team through the breach. The gang leader moved like the elite operator he was, but Sarah saw something in his movements. Desperation mixed with recognition. "You know what Thailand was really about," Butcher called out as his team advanced. "What we were really building down there. Shadow operations using gangs to recruit soldiers?" Sarah challenged. "Running drugs to finance operations, threatening families. That's not professional. That's just crime with better training. We were creating something bigger, a private army that could operate without political restrictions. Do what needed to be done, and kill anyone who got in your way," Sarah finished. Just like those bodies at the training facility. Tommy's voice cut through their exchange. Sarah, federal teams have secured the clubhouse. They found their real files, everything about Thailand, about Crane's operation. Upload it all, Sarah ordered. Every server we've got. Butcher's laugh carried bitter understanding. You weren't defending the store. You were using our attack to justify a full federal response, giving them probable cause to raid everything. Finally figured it out, Sarah confirmed. This was never about protecting one business. Through their cameras, they watched federal teams coordinating with local citizens, David Wong directing them to Crimson Riders' stockpiles, Mr. Winters pointing out their surveillance posts. The whole town had become part of the operation. Sir? Ice's voice crackled over their intercepted comms. Crane's ordering an immediate extraction. Says we need to finish this now. You hear that, Miller? Butcher called out. Time to end this. Just like Thailand. No, Sarah replied, taking up her position. This time we do it right. Another explosion shook the building, but Tommy was already responding. They're making their final push. All teams converging on our position. Federal response teams 3 minutes out, Rodriguez reported. They won't make it in time, Mike noted grimly. They don't need to, Sarah assured them. Tommy, execute Protocol Sierra. Sarah, he hesitated. That's going to destroy everything. The store was never the target, she reminded him. Just the bait. Through their feeds, they watched Butcher realize too late what they'd really planned. The gang leader's military training told him the truth. He hadn't been attacking a defensive position. He'd walked into a trap designed by someone who knew exactly how he thought, how he'd react, because they'd had the same training. All teams, Sarah commanded. Show them what happens when you threaten family in Pine Ridge Valley. The night descended into carefully orchestrated chaos as Sarah's true plan revealed itself. The Crimson Riders thought they were fighting to protect their operation. They were about to learn that sometimes you have to sacrifice a building to save a town. Protocol Sierra wasn't just a defensive measure. It was the culmination of 3 weeks of planning. As Tommy initiated the sequence, Miller's market transformed. From a fortress into a trap. Every shelf, every freezer unit, every seemingly defensive position had been carefully placed for this moment. All teams in position, Tommy reported, his voice steady despite the chaos. Waiting for your mark. Through their cameras, they watched Butcher's forces breach their final perimeter. The gang leader had his elite team, Ice, Ghost, Ravage, and Spike, moving with perfect military precision, but Sarah saw the flaw in their approach. They still think we're defending the store, she noted. James, ready? Ready when you are, sis. Got their escape routes covered. Miller, Butcher's voice carried over the gunfire. You're trapped. No way out except through us. Sarah's response was to trigger the first phase of Sierra. Suddenly the store's lights died, plunging everything into darkness, but not the darkness Butcher's team had trained for. UV markers active, Tommy reported. They're tagged. In the pitch black, every Crimson Riders operative glowed faintly. Their boots had picked up specialized paint during their earlier breaches, paint that only showed under certain conditions, paint that Sarah's team could see through their modified gear. What the? Ghost's confusion carried over their intercepted comms. Sir, we're compromised. Crane's helicopter making another pass, Tommy warned. They're setting up for extraction on the roof. Let them, Sarah replied. Mike, anti-air measures in place? Just like we planned. Through their network, they watched Pine Ridge Valley transform. Every business the Crimson Riders had threatened, every citizen they tried to intimidate, became part of a coordinated response. Golden Dragon's staff blocked alleyways. Winter's hardware customers secured intersections. Even the local teens Lisa hung out with played their part, using their bikes to guide federal forces toward escape routes. This is impossible, they heard Butcher mutter. The whole town's working together. That's what happens, Sarah broadcast, when you mistake a community for an easy target. Another explosion rocked the store, but this one came from underground, the Crimson Riders destroying Evidence in the storm drains. Too late, Tommy confirmed. All data secured. Federal servers got everything. Financial records, training documents, personnel files, including the real story about Thailand. Butcher's laugh carried bitter understanding. Thailand. Should have known you weren't just some random SEAL's sister. You were the one who almost exposed Crane's whole operation. Not almost, Sarah corrected. Just waiting for the right moment, the right proof. Through their feeds, they watched federal tactical teams systematically securing Pine Ridge Valley. The Crimson Riders' carefully planned escape routes became kill zones as law enforcement used Sarah's intel to close the net. Sir, Spike's panic carried over their comms. Feds got the training facility. They found the weapons cache, the documents. Doesn't matter, Butcher replied coldly. Plan Omega, burn it all. But Sarah had been waiting for this. Tommy, now! The store's sprinkler system activated, not with water, but with a specialized chemical that rendered incendiary devices useless. The Crimson Riders' attempt to destroy evidence became another trap. You planned for everything. Butcher's voice carried grudging respect. Every contingency, every response. Had good teachers, Sarah replied. Same ones you had. Difference is, I didn't forget the most important lesson. Yeah? What's that? The mission isn't about the objective. It's about the people you're protecting. Crane's voice suddenly cut through their comms. Butcher, abandon the assault. Primary extraction point compromised. Move to secondary. Negative, Butcher interrupted. We finish this, just like Thailand. The store shook as the Crimson Riders launched their final assault, but Sarah's team was ready. Each defensive position became an offensive advantage. Every retreat turned into an ambush. Sarah, Tommy's voice carried warning, they're not just attacking anymore. These charges, they're trying to bring down the whole building. Good, Sarah replied calmly, because that's exactly what we want them to do. Through their surveillance, they watched Butcher finally understand. The gang leader's military training told him what he should have seen hours ago. The store wasn't just a defensive position. It was bait, a sacrifice play designed to draw out Crane's whole operation. All teams, Sarah commanded. Final positions. Show them what happens when you threaten family in Pine Ridge Valley. The night erupted in carefully orchestrated destruction as Protocol Sierra entered its final phase. The Crimson Riders thought they were demolishing a store. Instead, they were providing the last piece of evidence needed to bring down an international criminal empire. Sarah. Tommy's voice carried both pride and sadness. It's time. Sarah took one last look at the store she'd grown up in, then gave the order that would destroy it all. Execute Sierra. Full collapse. The real war for Pine Ridge Valley was about to begin. Miller's Market had stood in Pine Ridge Valley for 3 generations. Now, as Protocol Sierra entered its final phase, the store prepared for its last act of defiance. Sarah watched through their feeds as Butcher's forces planted their demolition charges exactly where her team had planned for them to go. All civilian personnel clear, Tommy reported, his fingers still flying across their command systems. Federal. Teams have established a secure perimeter 3 blocks out. Town citizens are helping maintain the blockade. Through their network, they watched Pine Ridge Valley unite against the threat. David Wong and his restaurant staff coordinated with FBI tactical units, showing them the Crimson Riders' hidden routes through town. Harry Winter's regulars, mostly veterans themselves, secured intersections and provided real-time intelligence. Crane's helicopter circling back, James reported from his position. They're getting desperate. 3rd pass in 5 minutes. Let them sweat, Sarah replied, checking their positions one final time. Mike, charges set? Just like you planned. When this goes, it goes big. Sheriff Rodriguez's voice crackled through their radio. Sarah, got confirmation from Federal Command. They've frozen all the Crimson Riders' accounts. All of them, including Crane's offshore holdings. Sir, ICE's panic carried over their intercepted comms. They're not just hitting our local assets. They've got everything. The training camps, in 3 states, The weapon stockpiles, the recruitment centers. Shut up! Butcher's command carried the edge of desperation. Focus on the objective. We finish Miller, then extract. But Sarah heard the uncertainty in the gang leader's voice. His military training was telling him what he didn't want to admit. They'd lost before the first shot was fired tonight. Sarah, Tommy called out, getting movement in sectors 3 and 4. They're setting up a synchronized detonation, trying to bring down the whole structure at once. Good. Sarah nodded. They're following the playbook. James, ready? Got their demo teams marked. When this kicks off, Miller! Butcher's voice boomed through the smoke-filled store. Last chance. Stand down, let us complete our mission, maybe we talk terms. Sarah's response was to activate the store's external speakers, broadcasting to the whole block. Pine Ridge Valley doesn't negotiate with criminals, no matter how well trained they are. Through their surveillance, they watched Crane's reaction in the helicopter. The private military contractor was realizing too late just how completely he'd been outmaneuvered. All units, full assault, Crane ordered over their captured frequencies. Level that store and everyone inside it. Negative, Butcher countermanded. We do this right, professional, just like Thailand. Thailand was a disaster, Sarah broadcast. That's why we shut it down. That's why we're shutting this down. Tommy's screens lit up with new warnings. Multiple detonation sequences initiated. They're not just targeting support structures anymore. They're going for total destruction. Match their timing, Sarah ordered. Sync our charges with theirs. Sir? Ravage's voice carried over the Crimson Riders channel. Something's wrong. These demo patterns, they're too perfect. Like... Someone wanted us to plant our charges in exactly these positions, Sarah finished for him. Finally figuring it out. Through their cameras, they watched Butcher's expression shift as the truth hit him. The gang leader's military training screamed warnings he'd ignored until now. Fall back, Butcher ordered. It's a trap. The whole building's a... The first explosions cut him off. But these weren't just the Crimson Riders' demolition charges. They were Sarah's team's carefully placed countercharges, timed to turn the store's destruction into a precisely controlled cascade. Sarah called out, execute final sequence. Her friend's hands moved across the controls with practiced precision. Every system they'd installed, every defensive measure they'd prepared, became part of a synchronized response that would make any military demolition expert proud. All teams clear, Mike reported, ready for primary collapse. Through their network, they watched federal agents processing the last of the evidence. Crane's operation had been sophisticated, but it had fallen to something more powerful. Community solidarity, got word from FBI command, Rodriguez reported. They're calling this a template for future operations. How communities can work with law enforcement to fight organized crime. Because it's not just about force, Sarah explained to the gathered volunteers. It's about people standing together, protecting what matters. Butcher, working alongside his former enemies, nodded in understanding. That's what we forgot in Thailand. What Crane never understood. Real strength comes from community, not control. The sun climbed higher over Pine Ridge Valley as cleanup efforts continued. Where the Crimson Riders had sought to create fear, they'd instead inspired unity. Where they'd tried to destroy, they'd motivated rebuilding. Sarah, Tommy called out, got structural engineers arriving in an hour. They want to review the site, start planning proper reconstruction. Town council's expediting permits, Rodriguez added. Everyone wants to be part of this. Through their surveillance, they watched Pine Ridge Valley demonstrating why you don't threaten a community that knows how to fight back. Every act of destruction had created an opportunity for improvement. This is more than just rebuilding a store, David Wong observed, watching the coordinated efforts. We're building something new, something stronger. Sarah looked at the gathered community, citizens, law enforcement, even reformed enemies, working together. The Crimson Riders had thought destroying her store would break Pine Ridge Valley's spirit. Instead, they'd helped forge it stronger than ever before. The emergency town council meeting in Pine Ridge Valley's community center felt more like a family gathering than a formal assembly. Citizens packed the room, united by their shared victory and common purpose. Where the Crimson Riders had tried to create division, they'd instead forged unbreakable bonds. First order of business, Mayor Thompson announced, is the rebuilding of Miller's Market. But I think we all know this is about more than just replacing what was lost. Tommy stepped forward with detailed plans displayed on the projector. His natural leadership during the crisis had earned him new respect in the community. We're proposing more than just a grocery store, he explained, highlighting different sections of the blueprints. A community center, training facility, an emergency response hub all in one. Through their network, Sarah and her team watched Pine Ridge Valley continuing its recovery even during the meeting. Cleanup crews coordinated their efforts, federal agents processed evidence, and volunteers maintained security. Got the preliminary structural assessment, Harry Winters reported, rising from his seat. Foundation's still solid. We can build on what's there, make it stronger than before. David Wong stood, representing local business owners. Golden Dragons already pledged support. We're organizing fundraising events, coordinating with other businesses. This is everyone's project now. Sheriff Rodriguez added her report. FBI's finished processing the scene. They've also authorized the release of seized Crimson Riders assets. Seems fitting their money helps rebuild what they tried to destroy. Sarah watched the community she'd protected for years, now protecting her. Every business owner the Crimson Riders had threatened now offered assistance. Every citizen they'd tried to intimidate volunteered help. There's more, Tommy continued, switching to new displays. We've got offers from technical schools wanting to partner with us, create apprenticeship programs, provide education opportunities. Just like what you did for me, Lisa spoke up from where she sat with other young volunteers. Giving kids a chance to learn real skills, become part of something important. Butcher, present under federal supervision, stood to address the council. My men, the ones who've surrendered and are cooperating, they're skilled engineers, construction experts. Let us help rebuild, start making things right. The room tensed briefly, but Sarah's nod carried weight. Redemption starts with action, she reminded them, with choosing to build instead of destroy. Through their surveillance feeds, they watched more volunteers arriving from neighboring towns. Pine Ridge Valley's story was spreading, inspiring other communities to stand against intimidation. Getting reports from across the state, Rodriguez announced. Other towns are organizing neighborhood watches, coordinating with law enforcement. You've started something bigger than Pine Ridge Valley. Victor, monitoring security from the back, added his observation. Crane's whole operation depended on isolation. Communities too scared to work together. That ends here. The mayor called for project proposals, and the room came alive with ideas. Every suggestion built on the others, creating something larger than any individual could have planned. Technical training center, one resident offered. Teaching mechanical. Skills, engineering principles. Give young people real opportunities. Community gathering space, another added. Meeting rooms, event areas. Place where people can come together, organize. Emergency response hub, Mrs. Chen suggested. After what we've learned about coordination and communication, we could help. Other towns prepare. Mike, reviewing security footage, noted the change in Pine Ridge Valley. Look at this. People who barely spoke last week now planning projects together. Nothing unites like a common cause, James observed. Tommy's screens showed recovery efforts continuing even during the meeting. Got cleanup teams finishing Sector 3. Salvage operations recovered more equipment than we expected. And Sarah, they found your mom's old cash register intact. Sarah smiled at this small victory. Some things carried meaning beyond their practical value. We're not just rebuilding a business, she addressed the council. We're creating something that serves the whole community, something that carries forward what we learned these past few days. Through their network, they watched federal teams completing their investigation, Every piece of evidence they collected proved what Pine Ridge Valley had accomplished, defeating not just a gang, but a sophisticated criminal enterprise. Correct. Word from FBI command, Rodriguez reported quietly to Sarah. They're using Pine Ridge Valley as a case study, how communities can work with law enforcement to fight organized crime. Because it's not about firepower, Sarah replied. It's about people standing together. The council meeting continued as Pine Ridge Valley planned its future. Where the Crimson Riders had tried to instill fear, they'd instead inspired unity. Where they'd attempted to control through intimidation, they'd motivated cooperation. Final item, the mayor announced, naming the new facility. Any suggestions? David Wong stood again. Phoenix Center sounds nice, but maybe something more specific. Something that reminds us what happened here. Unity Center, Lisa suggested, drawing surprised looks. Because sometimes good things rise from destruction, and because everyone deserves a chance to start over. The vote was unanimous. Pine Ridge Valley had learned that strength comes not from power over others, but from people working together. The Crimson Riders had thought destroying Miller's Market would break the town's spirit. Instead, they'd helped create something far more powerful, a community that would never again mistake kindness for weakness.